What have you done, Mark? What have you created? I mean, I think what's amazing in certain businesses that you guys have done is you kind of created, to some extent, a platform or a playground, and it's almost amazing to see where the audience, the players, are taking it. What's the new meeting format? Are you doing a lot of like Strava bike calls, Strava walk calls?
Yeah, it's the walking and the running. I go out on these recovery runs now, throw the AirPods in, and just let's carry on a 30-minute one-on-one catch up. Or early morning this morning was great. Get out there, do my early morning meetings. Yeah, it's the best. But I literally have stopped people and said, "Oh, hold on a second. I got to start my Strava." So I was like, I don't want to lose that point 1 mile.
So that's actually like a really interesting kind of way to just dive into this is like, how do you guys think you've changed athletic behavior? We can start with small stuff like what'd you have for breakfast or what?
Yeah,
What's a
exactly.
recovery run?
Boom. Yeah, no, it's how we changed the global community and their behavior around athletics. Uh, Look, the mission from day one was pretty simple. Which, how do we just inspire? Even for Michael and I, we love being active, but man, it's just amazing the way life gets in the way. So, can we just build some tools and some fun things that, if we're the only two customers, it'll allow us to just maybe get out just one more day a week. We met on the crew team together. We kind of had that in our DNA. We wanted to keep that going, and that's. I hope that's a lot of what Strava's changed, is that when you bring together this community and you kind of get those kudos, or you see somebody who actually got up at 4:30 a.m. to get their workout in, that's enough to usually kind of push me to go find at least 30 minutes and just sweat a little bit. Now, have we gone beyond that? Yeah, I'm fascinated at watching the way people address segments and KOMs and, weekly goals. But for us, it was all about just go have some fun.
Okay, I can't let you off on that one. Tell me some of these crazies.
Oh my goodness. I mean, what are we seeing right now? We're seeing everything from the gentleman, I'm going to forget his name right now, but he basically painted the entire city of San Francisco with his heat map, where he ran every single road in the entire city. And he's actually spawned a whole trend now where people take their personal heat map and they make sure they don't miss a single road or trail in their community. We've got one right now. We've got the gentleman who's challenging people to do 20,000 feet of vertical within 5 miles, I think it is, or maybe it's even 5 kilometers, but it's within a very short stretch. So what you have are people using the Strava route builder to determine how much elevation can I find in as small a period of, small a space, and they go for it. The number of people who are out there Everesting. I don't know if you've heard this trend where you just try to do the total elevation of climbing Everest, but in as few hours as possible. I could go on for hours. It's
Actually,
incredible.
can you keep going? These are really interesting. Do you have any other ones that kind of come to mind?
Oh man. I mean, right now during COVID-19, we're just fascinated by, the number of marathons that have been run on porches and back patios and on the rooftops of apartment buildings. And actually not just marathons, 100-mile distances. Just the intensity with which people will continue their sport, even when constrained by shelter in place, it's awe-inspiring. The charitable acts that come from this. We've got, in the UK, there's just been phenomenal activity. There's this 5-5-5 phenomenon, which is do 5K for 5 days in a row and invite 5 of your friends to do it. And it just took off like wildfire. And so they've just seen this amazing compassion. And I'm sorry, and there was another one. It was $5 to the NHS. So hey, give up £5, go do your 5 miles in 5 days and invite 5 of your friends. And just, that kind of camaraderie around that type of thing, really powerful.
What have you done, Mark? What have you created? I mean, I think what's amazing in certain businesses that you guys have done is you kind of created, to some extent, a platform or a playground, and it's almost amazing to see where the audience, the players, are taking it.
Michael and I owe it to him. He said this a number of years ago. It's like, we don't own Strava. We don't run a Strava. We're somewhere between a curator and just sort of a park attendant. And It is truly owned by the community. It's something we've gone back to our roots in recent months because we realized when Michael and I sort of stepped back in, it's like, we got to give this back to the athletes. We got to, let's get back to just building athlete awesome, but just, everything. And you're exactly right. It's beyond our wildest dreams what has happened in the last 10 years.
Well, I want to highlight one thing you said just for the audience that's watching. And this is, I really admire this. And it's something I try to remind myself is build for yourself. You're like, hey, we're athletes. We want to have something fun. We want to have something to keep us accountable. And so I love that. And I really want to encourage everyone to follow your lead. Maybe I wasn't even expecting to talk about that, but can you tell me how did the company, maybe lose some of the direction that you wanted it, and then what kind of changes you guys had to do?
It was subtle. And I don't want to say we lost direction, but we were really focused as a company over the last 3 or 4 years around growth of the community. And it's an important part of a successful business. It's not like I look back and say it was a mistake. And we're proud of where we got to. I mean, we've got well north of 50 million plus athletes that are on Strava today. We add 1 million athletes every month. We're geographically distributed. We're across 195 countries. You can upload 32 different activities to Strava today. So I'm glad that we went through that. But honestly, no, I think in the process, some of what got lost was just our ability to listen effectively to our community, to understand what they needed from Strava. And sometimes it's the littlest things. It was because we were always trying to launch the next big thing to either continue to grow or so forth. We were losing sight of just, I'll call it maintenance, and just ensuring that we were improving the features that we had actually spent a lot of time on 3 years ago. So that's what when we come back to our roots, Michael stepped back in as CEO in November. I stepped back into a much more active role, and we've just sort of channeled the company to be very focused and disciplined around, we call it athlete awesome and business awesome. And business awesome for us it's our subscription business. We live or die by our athletes. We're not ad supported. We don't have 4 other business models. Like, we live or die by the freemium business that we're on. And so we just said to the whole company, let's go be great at that. And in exchange, let's just create a really amazing experience.
I am a paying subscriber. So I love your product.
Thank you.
I pay it. It's awesome. I'm a holdout though. I was like, I'm not giving these guys money no matter what. They'll never get a dime. And I've changed my mindset over there, especially, as I've made more money, and I try to just pay forward, back, sideways. I pay the creators. Like, you guys are putting a lot of money so that I can enjoy it. And if I have the ability, I want to keep supporting it. What does it mean to be athlete awesome? And then how do you keep the company focused on that?
Yeah. So athlete awesome is just, it's a simple way for us saying, are we very clear who our customer is and who we're building for? And that we've got to say no to a lot of things. There was a little bit of a challenge around just being a slave to too many masters. If you look on Strava today, and I'll give you an example of where it works really well. So as we've grown as a community, there's a great opportunity for us to incorporate other sports brands into the Strava experience. And when it's done well, you can see it on the challenges. I think you participate in some of the challenges. I've seen that where they're better when brands are partnered with us and offer up sort of rewards for finishing, all of that kind of stuff. So that's a great example where both our partner and Strava are committed to the athlete experience, to that athlete awesome opportunity. But the brand is also, full disclosure, like, they'll pay to sponsor that challenge. Where we fall short is when we start to find ourselves like, oh, what are other things we can do for the brands and get the brands more integrated into Strava and so forth. And we just wanted to be really careful that we want to partner with them around great experiences for our athletes. But if we ever start to lose sight and all of a sudden we're building for those brands so they have maybe greater access to our community, I think that's where we tend to fail. That's where we're not as good.
Yeah, because I'm not a runner. I know there's like drama. Some of the Strava runners are like, oh, you don't give us enough attention, which I don't care about. But I think what's interesting as a business that you guys do is that you have a phrase that you can ask yourselves, which is almost it's a value of sorts. As you guys are doing things in the company, I'm assuming, is that how it is internally? Like, when you're doing something like, yo, is this athlete awesome, or is this something else?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When we got 180 folks inside Strava today who are all passionate Strava members as well. So it oftentimes even starts inside the 4 walls. Like, is this awesome for me? We do what are called Strava Jams. They're basically the equivalent of a hackathon. And it's awesome because you'll see 30, 40 projects come to the surface where Why didn't I think of that? Yeah, that's another. We got to deliver that to our athletes as soon as possible. We've got one right now. I don't know if you've discovered. We rolled out routes where you can now. It's like a whole new chapter for
It's
Strava, because what we're so excited about at Strava is there's some things that we can do today that we could not do 10 years ago. Like if you think about it, when we started Strava, it was a really interesting challenge, which was we have one cyclist uploading one ride to Strava. How do we create something interesting, right? It's
yeah.
like talk about the ultimate single player mode. And we figured it out. And then we got a couple riders on there. And over time, we started to build this experience. Well, you fast forward to today, we've got over 3 billion activities on Strava. We're global in terms of sort of our presence. And so it afforded us the opportunity to kind of take a step back and say, what can we do now that we couldn't do before? And that's where this whole notion of exploration and showing people routes. So routes is just a simple thing where you tell us, hey, I'm located here and I need a 20-mile ride. And with the click of a button, we'll just make some suggestions. We'll show you. And you can then play with it in terms of, hey, I want more dirt versus road, or I want more hills, more flat. And we try to tweak it. It's still early in its days, but it's so much fun because it just creates a whole new playground, like you described, that you can sort of use Strava with.
I'll tell you, I did it and I love it. And it's one of these things, it took me I'm a road biker. Mostly I do little mountain, but it took me onto a pretty advanced mountain bike trail. So
Oops.
it's my responsibility. I don't blame you guys. I should have looked at the map when I was like going from road to this travel. And then I started cyclocrossing with on my shoulder. But one of the things that when I think of Strava, I think you listen to community, but you guys also seem to kind of pave your own way. Like I think people are like, do routes. Why haven't you done routes in years ago? And it created opportunities. Like I use Ride with GPS, which is a really cool service.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious what have you said no to? And then how do you guys choose those directions?
Yeah, it's the hardest thing inside Strava. I mean, we call it the noise of opportunity. It's deafening.
Ooh.
There are so many great directions that we can take, and we see it. We see the feedback every day. I was talking to our community management team just yesterday and fully acknowledged that there is rarely a piece of feedback that comes in where I don't say that's a great idea. There is some really ugly sausage making that goes on inside Strava. I wish I could tell you that we had this really artful way of, prioritizing and so forth. We're getting better. Part of it is setting some specific long-term goals around some themes. So we have some themes around areas. We have themes around community and what we think is important for us over the next 6, 12, 18 months that we want to deliver to the community. What we mean by community is not the global community. We mean your community, Noah. You probably have, I don't know how many followers you have in Strava, but I know for myself, there's the mass people that I love to follow. And then there's this sort of concentric circles. There's down to that tight group, kind of my tribe. And there's a set of features that we know we want to continue to develop for that tribe so that you can communicate effectively. You can do your meetups. You can challenge each other. The fun things there. There's themes around competition. There's themes around gear. There's themes around training. So we kind of had these broad categories. We move those, feels both innovative, but also affords us the time to always be working on the little things. Does that make sense?
Oh, that was awesome. I mean, it's just fascinating how, sometimes you want to know how they're cooking in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, no, it's ugly. It's the kitchen. Our kitchen is there's a lot of food spilled on the ground, but we're good at cleaning it up. So it always tastes good in the end. I hope at least
Yeah.
It'll get to taste better.
Well, I do want to talk about a lot of stuff going on today, but the one thing, and I was looking up a lot of stuff about you guys and so forth. And I think what's interesting is in retrospect, it's always easy. Like, oh yeah, of course I need like a social network tracker for my biking activities, which I think that's the majority of the activities, or it's the highest one. So I was one of the first people at Facebook, and now everyone's like, oh, of course Facebook makes sense. But at the time, people were like, I'm going to connect with the person and then message them on this thing. And I think what people forget about Strava is that there was Runkeeper and there was MapMyFitness. And there was, I don't know, probably you know it better than I do, 10 other competitors. And so I think one thing I was really curious to hear more from like the stories and the feelings is that you did it 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago. You did your own money, which I call that big D energy, because that's balls, man. You're saying I bet my own money. You're taking 100% risk. So I guess what gave you that conviction to put your own money in, and some of the moments of doubt, especially 10 years ago, because there wasn't all the phone stuff there is, and the Wahoos and the Garmins.
No, you're right. Yeah, it is funny. People have this impression of Strava as this mobile app that services these athletes around the world across all these various sports. But you're right. When we started 2009, to be very clear, we were a website where you had to use a very specific piece of equipment. You had to own a Garmin cycling computer. It was called a Garmin 305, was kind of like the baseline computer that you had on your handlebars. And you had to bring that home, plug it in to the back of your computer, and upload that data to Strava. It was really crude. So why would we even contemplate a business like that? Part of it was, I love to tell entrepreneurs, it's like, let me be clear. Our expectations, we have this phrase, I took it from one of my old finance executives in a prior company, and it's an equation: success equals results minus expectations. And I like it in a lot of, there's times where you can sandbag and it becomes very inappropriate. But I think when it came to the early days of Strava, like Michael and I have been very fortunate. We'd had a great run with the prior company that we'd built in the late 90s, early 2000s. We saw what it was to get big fast. We saw what it was to take a company public, so forth. And a lot of our desire with Strava wasn't so much to replicate that as it was, could we go create a company that, as I mentioned earlier, A, solves problems that we have that are important to us, and B, frankly, kind of the intellectual challenge of, we really admired these consumer brands out there that he and I used to always sit down and say, if we could have started any other company in the world, what would it have been? And no, it was not, with all credibility to the Oracles and Ciscos and Apples and even Facebooks of the world, those were not the companies we were naming, right? We were naming Oakley sunglasses and Patagonia and, Virgin Records and all these great sort of iconic consumer brands. And like, that'd be so cool. Could we do that? And so then we just had these humble beginnings. So sorry, long answer to your question, but
no, you go longer.
Much of the early stage. Well, the early stage was really just, what's the problem we have? And it's like, this data. And then I got to give credit to somebody here. Michael and I invited somebody else in early on, Davey Kitchell. We were just so fortunate to get onto our team. He was a buddy that Michael had met back in Hanover, New Hampshire. And he was also an ex-rower, an endurance athlete, big cyclist and runner. And he had this passion for turning performance data into something that I'll just call magical. He wanted to figure out how you could visualize it better, how you could do it. And he and Michael and I, we started brainstorming around, what could we do with this data coming off of this computer, this little handlebar thing. And all the credit to him, segments and stuff like that. That's where it really came from. And so with that, we just started tinkering. And if it had been a company that only supported 10 employees and a couple hundred cyclists every month, honestly, we probably would have been happy as long as we were profitable and growing. And then we caught some really fascinating tailwinds. Facebook, you're right. What happened with Facebook was it introduced to the world the value of sharing personal information, which did not exist prior to that time. Why would I possibly tell someone what I had for breakfast? Why would I possibly share my workout? But Facebook did that. And then when you add to that just the explosion in wearable devices and smartphones and the way in which you could capture workout data seamlessly, game changing for us. We just, we could not have gotten any luckier to see the advent of the iPhone and then Fitbit and Apple Watch and Garmin is everything that they've done.
That sounds like the tidal wave didn't even get started. I mean, you guys were maybe like 2 years ahead of the tidal wave.
We were. Our luck early was that you mentioned sort of the run keepers and My Fitnesses. We went left while they all went right. We took this strategy that was, let's go an inch wide and a mile deep with one very specific audience. And they're affectionately known as mammals. I can joke because I'm one of them. MAMIL, middle-aged man in Lycra. That was our target audience, Noah.
I'm becoming one. This is the worst.
Sorry,
I'm becoming one.
Yeah, you're headed there. You're not there yet. But let me tell you, we went so narrow and said, okay, let's pick this audience because these were the guys spending $300 on that Garmin device. These were the guys obsessing over their data. These were the guys totally hiding, by the way. They did not want their friends or their coworkers to know they were out at 3:00 in the afternoon doing a 30-mile ride. but they were so passionate about their sport and their bicycle and their buddies. And so while all these other guys were kind of pursuing larger
Yeah.
markets and runners, we just went deep, and we went with that group. And it proved to be a pivotal moment for us, because by going there, we developed this credibility in the market and sort of a foundation of authenticity. Just, hey, these guys really understand. Michael and I aren't cyclists by definition. I love to mountain bike, and Michael's a pretty good road cyclist today, 10 years later. But frankly, we were a couple of runners that just found this niche and said, let's go talk to them and let's see if we can figure that out. And so that's where the early years really paid off. You're right. Then we caught these other tailwinds.
How did you get to that decision to zag?
We'd been really lucky in the prior company. So Michael and I were fortunate to build a company called Kana Communications in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was a enterprise software. Basically, we designed communication tools for all these budding .coms and any company that was trying to build their web presence in the late 90s, right, at the birth of the commercial internet. And we took this idea. What we found was a problem in the marketplace, which was customer email response. If you went and built a website, almost by definition, if you were doing any kind of commerce, you were faced with a deluge of customer email. And there was just no solution in the market. And so we came up with a pretty easy way to manage that traffic. But the irony was, when we went to go raise capital for it and find some investors, the vast majority of investors said, guys, you're not even a product. You're a feature. You're definitely not a company. It's like, are you guys, look at Siebel and I mean, there are all these crazy, Clarify and Scopus, and there were all these classic sort of enterprise software companies that had email in them. It's like, how are you going to survive? And our point was, we hear you, but we have these customers who are willing to actually pay us for this, it might be a point solution, and they're paying us. So we're a little confused. It's like, and we were naive. We were also innocent. We were 26 years old. And it's like, what do you mean? I mean, we found a product and we found a customer and they have a need and they're willing to pay us. Why isn't that a good business? And candidly, between you and I, know they were wrong. Like, we went inch wide, mile deep with the customer email thing. And what the investors missed was, actually not all of them. We had some great investors who did come in, but what they missed was that, one, we established that credibility and we got in with these folks. And as they started to think about their greater infrastructure, we were part of that conversation. And two, nobody could have predicted how big a problem customer email would ultimately become. And, we were able to ride that wave and build a great business. I mean, we 1,200 employees, hundreds of millions of revenue, took it public. I mean, it was a lot of fun. So that taught us a lot about, it's okay to be niche. Niche gives you a lot of confidence once you start to get number one in a niche is a really powerful place, because once you're there, you start to have confidence, and now you can think about expansion.
That's the toughest one, man. And I help a lot of people start businesses, and even in our own companies that we run, you get greedy. I'm like, oh, but I could have more, especially when you're starting. I'm like, yo, you'll give me money? You'll give me money? Oh, I'll take it wherever I can get it. It's, as you get going. Yeah. And so I think I really like what you said about being number one in something. That really resonated with me.
Yeah, no, I multiple reasons. Not only do I think it gives you that confidence and then think about expansion in a more sort of thoughtful, strategic way, I also just think you're often surprised at that number one, that market itself, how oftentimes it will end up being much bigger than you initially anticipated. It's just hard to see until you're in it and working with that clientele. So again, we're 2 for 2 with our own companies. Doesn't mean that there aren't a bunch of other ways to do it, but we've been happy with the result.
No, that's why I wanted to share your story. I mean, you're 2 for 2. Most people are 0 for either not doing anything, 0 for 0, or 0 for a lot more than that. Wow. Did you have? It's been how long now since it started? Over 10 years, right? Yeah. We started January 2009, so we are in our 11th year. Kind of right after a recession. And I think a lot of people think that there wasn't opportunities after recessions, and I always highlight, recession was 2008 to 2010, and you guys actually came out during that period. Did you have moments of doubt, especially because you're using your own money? And I don't think when did you guys even start monetizing?
So full disclosure, we financed it through the first couple of years, but we did end up raising capital. So we've raised, well, yeah, I won't bore you. We can go into sort of what we've done, but we ended up raising capital through that. And the monetization process was there from the very beginning, though.
Oh,
That
really?
was there. We were always freemium from almost day one of going out with a commercial product. It was a different type of freemium. So in the earliest days, we were usage based. Because you were using a Garmin cycling computer, basically what we said is you have full access to all the features for 5 rides a month for free. After the 6th ride, you got to pay. And no, we love that model. That our conversion rates were off the charts. Um, the challenge for us was when we launched our mobile app. We launched our mobile app in mid 2011. Quick backstory: we launched it because we're trying to solve a very specific problem, which was, man, our barrier to entry here is really high. You got to go spend $300 with Garmin just to start working with Strava. We need to lower the barrier. Can we create a tracking app on Strava that allows people to participate without having to spend all that money? Now, that was great because what happened was as soon as we launched our app, boy, did we see growth. I mean, off the charts, the App Store and everything else. But the downside was we had this naive impression that people will use that app to track, and then they'll go to our beautiful website to see all these wonderful features that we have. Turns out nobody leaves the app. They don't do that. And so we were in a conundrum because we wanted them to continue using the app to track and obviously to experience Strava, but we couldn't tell them to stop after 5 rides a month. So we shifted in late 2011 to a feature-based freemium model where you do get a lot of great stuff in the free version of Strava. And, we're getting more and more confident that the really, really great stuff is on the other side of the paywall. That's where you want to ultimately get.
How do you think companies should think about that? I want to go to more of the scale and strategy stuff, but I think specifically pricing. How did you guys figure out this is the free stuff now, and let's make this part is like they're serious, or how do you decide what's on which line?
Yeah, that one's really evolved in a pretty aggressive fashion here, even just in the last 12 to 18 months. Historically, we were very focused on kind of the training needs. For almost the more serious you were about the training, the more likely the features were going to be on the other side of the paywall. So if you're a cyclist and you had your power meter and so forth, there were some really great things that we could do on that side. We've changed that completely. Now, frankly, we've heard over and over, your free is too good. And we're the first to acknowledge it. Like, there's so much that's in there that the vast majority of folks are happy. And frankly, I don't want to say we've been fine with that. There's things we're doing internally now at Strava to recognize that, hey, wait, where is the magic coming from? And let's make sure that people recognize the value. But our focus now is very much around make sure that free is good enough, that people who want that tracking and want that community aspect of Strava, they can get that there. But almost anything that we do inside Strava today, it falls on the other side of the paywall. Most of our innovation, we talked about routes earlier, that's going to fall on the other side of the paywall. And it's because we want to have this very direct athlete awesome experience. We want our customers to know we're building for them, and that we measure success predicated on, we can measure NPS, we can do other things, but ultimately we measure success on when our athletes start saying, hey, that subscription, like, it's a no-brainer. Like, you got to subscribe. We appreciate your theory, which is, hey, I want to pay it forward and I want to support these guys. That's good up to a point. But frankly, we want you to ultimately say, guys, you've got to pay. It's $5 a month. It's a no-brainer. And so that's a lot of the thinking that goes into Strava today.
Well, I think sometimes, and I don't pay just out of charity only because that there's certain features, and I honestly don't even remember which ones at this point. I just know I'm paying. But I think sometimes we don't think about the value ratio to cost that we get of things. So I pay $5 or whatever. I don't know what I pay you guys, honestly. And how much value I get out of just using Strava in the regular. And I think a lot of us don't think about that proportionally. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
It's on us. We realize we need to do a better job of making sure people appreciate that. So
2 things with that. Number one, because you put your money in the beginning though, you put your own cash in making it going. Did you have moments of doubt? Was there any moments, or when was there moments of like, oh, maybe this wasn't such a great idea?
From a business model standpoint, we were really fortunate. As I mentioned, we built that freemium. So we built the ability to have a subscription really early to test that. And we were pleased with the conversion rates. So I think that we were confident there was something. We just weren't sure what the scale would look like. where moments of doubt came from, ironically, had more to do with just unintended consequences of the Strava experience. Like there was a pivotal moment a couple of years in where I think it was 2012. We had a wrongful death lawsuit. It's hard for me to go into it, but basically a young cyclist, a gentleman who was I think 41 years old, passed away while doing a descent in the. And 2 years later, we were sued by his extended family for wrongful death, basically accusing us of being sort of like a race director or an event director and creating an unsafe scenario for him. And it was thrown out by the courts. And, we obviously defended ourselves with vigor and felt very confident in our position. But when you ask about sort of just the fact that someone would even accuse us of something like that was where I think for me personally, you have to take a step back and reflect on, we're here to inspire people to live healthy lives. And that's, if we're not conducting ourselves in that way and we're not contributing in a positive way to this universe, life's too short. We shouldn't do it. So sorry, it's maybe not the answer you're looking for, but for me, the reflection, the business itself has been very good to us. It's just making sure that those unintended, another one, heat map. I don't know if you watched the history of our heat map, but it was about 2 years ago where we had this fascinating sort of explosion of press where people were accusing us of outing military bases around the world with our heat map. And, the reality of the situation wasn't that. We have a very good relationship with the military, and there was nothing that we were disclosing that they weren't comfortable with, but it led to really hard discussions around what does privacy look like on Strava? And are we ensuring that people understand the controls they have and the options they have? Because there was some education we just realized we needed to do. So
probably, I think sometimes with these businesses, you don't even expect it. Like you're probably not thinking, oh, if they're leaving from the house and we have celebs like Lance and they can see where he lives, like we have to probably consider starting it outside of those things. It's just probably stuff you didn't, it's just the playground exploded.
It's both the fun, but the curse of building companies where if you're building from scratch, then some of this has never been dealt with before. As someone who was at Facebook.
Yeah.
Who could have imagined?
Mark imagined it. That's one thing. Well, the one thing you said I want to highlight, and I can tell you what Mark did as well, is that I love that you're purpose driven. And this is just me projecting. I'm just assuming that. But you said like, we're doing it for these athletes. We're doing it for this, like the love of athletics. That's a purpose. Like you have a mission that you're on.
Oh, yeah.
That's not getting stopped. And with Mark at Facebook, I was there in 2005 and he was very clear he was going to connect the whole world and nothing was going to stop him. And to work there with that type of vision was inspiring.
Yeah.
And he recruited the top people in the world and it was special.
And he remains consistent in his message even today. But there are unintended consequences of connecting the world. And so you have to, and that's when you ask sort of where are those, I don't want to call them, even moments of doubt is too strong a word, but when you have to step back and just make sure to reflect that your purpose is not at odds with other sort of things that you value, I think that's the tricky part sometimes.
Did you have other business ideas? For some reason, I was really curious, what other business ideas did you have and why did you decide this one instead?
Yeah, so there's a long history on this one. So Strava actually dates back to 1995. So quick history. So Michael and I, who are co-founders here, we met on the crew team at Harvard in the late 80s. He graduated 88. I was class of 90. We met in that boathouse, and it was important for two reasons. Not only did we become these best friends, and now we've been business partners for 20 plus years, but the experience we had in that boathouse was life-changing. Like, to be on that team at that moment in time, just the camaraderie, the esprit de corps, the trash talking, the competition, the grind. Everything that just came. It was beautiful. My degree should say crew. It does not. My education reflects nothing of what I studied in the classroom. It was just these great 4 years. The only problem was we graduated, and it just appeared. So when I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur in 1995, I left my job. I'd been working for a private equity firm in Palo Alto, and I left to go start something. Michael was teaching at Stanford. He'd gone off, got his PhD in economics, and was teaching there. And I was brainstorming with him. And what I was missing, going back to this notion, I was missing that team. I was missing sort of just the camaraderie that came from that. And so we created a business plan called Kana Sports. And it was the world's first virtual locker room. And we were going to use this burgeoning thing, the internet, to bring our buddies back together and to try to create that. Good news was we ultimately created it. The bad news was, man, were we early, right? There was no way it was going to work in 1995. But it introduced us to the customer email problem. So in an ironic twist of fate, that entrepreneurial journey, we met with a bunch of guys, including a bunch of sports companies, and they actually started telling us about this customer email. And when we realized that there was just no way we were going to create an experience that would work, we gravitated towards this thing that we found along the way and built Kana. We just had to change the name. So that's where it came from. So to fast forward to 2009, it wasn't that we just dusted off the business plan. We pursued a number of different ideas sort of in parallel, but this one really started to take on traction.
What were the other ideas?
Probably the one we spent the most time on, actually, Davey Kitchell and I kind of paralleled down the Strava path, and Michael and one of our other early folks, actually his nephew, Pella, they pursued something called Vatten, which stands for, I think, water in Swedish. And it was our disdain for the just sheer volume of plastic bottles that get consumed every day for water. And so we actually started to look at, could there be a way where you could basically deliver water in the same way that it's the old milkman style? Like, what would it be? What would it look like? Could you do a scalable model around, glass? Clearly we're happy we pursued the Strava one, but it was, it was those kinds of things. We were trying to think about climate change. We were trying, other trends that were out there that were important to us personally. And so we were looking at, is there something around water? Is there something around recycling? There's got to be a better way. And so that was one of the ones that it didn't make the show, but we spent a lot of time on it.
Did you just launch both and you saw more traction? Because by the way, I do believe I just saw something like that launched like a month ago, where it's like a subscription for water bottles.
See, here we are 10 years later, and it finally came around. We never went any further than researching what could it start to look like. We were sort of researching these in parallel.
How did you research Strava? So how did you get the data or to get the conviction that it would make sense?
Yeah, this is the other thing, law of small numbers. It's so easy to sit out here today and say, we're getting 1 million athletes every month, and isn't this great? The pivotal moment for us, so Davey Kitchell built this really raw website. We called it the Green Machine because it was this horrific color of green, not the Strava orange that we're also sort of, beloved to. And this was summer of 2008. We built this website that had a bunch of features in it. Frankly, almost as many as Strava has today. It was incredible what he was able to put into this thing. And we invited basically 10 riders on the West Coast and 10 riders on the East Coast, 10 cyclists on each coast that were buddies of ours. We ensured that they had Garmin's. So we literally went out and bought Garmin's for these guys and said, look, during the Tour de France in July of 2008, we're going to run this competition. And all we ask is that you guys upload each of your daily rides to this Strava thing. And we're going to run competitions along the way. So, one day we'd send out an email to these guys and say, hey, whoever posts the fastest 5K on their bike, sometime in the next 24 hours, free set of race wheels. And then we just sit back and watch. And a couple things happened. One was just watching the interaction amongst the cyclists was fascinating. We didn't even really have it built into Strava, but just the emails back and forth and the West Coast versus East Coast, and just, again, the trash talking and the camaraderie. The other thing was behavioral change. Like, we realized, boy, you put a set of race wheels in front of a bunch of cyclists, and all of a sudden they weren't just recruiting the 10 guys that we had asked to be on Strava. They were recruiting their entire cycling club to go out and create like this peloton so that they could absolutely knock out the 5K faster than anybody on the West Coast. So we did that for about a month in 2008 and came out of that with, frankly, strong conviction that we'd found something. The feedback we were getting from them was that they were all saying, you're making my cycling life better. I want to keep uploading. And when we heard that, we didn't necessarily have the business model figured out, but we realized, let's keep pulling on this thread. Let's put some more engineering resources towards this. Let's see if, we don't know how we're going to commercialize this quite yet, but there's something here. And so that was what gave us the conviction.
You guys did get a lot of celebrities as well to come onto Strava, I've noticed. I mean, like the cycling world.
Yeah, though, it's so we're really grateful. You're absolutely right. We probably have 2/3 of the pro tour now that uploads even the stages during the tour. We've got Olympic gold medal performances on Strava. You mentioned Lance earlier. Lance he's been a great fan and supporter of us for years, which we're appreciative of. The thing I will tell you is that we we don't do endorsements. We don't. There's nobody who's paid. We're not your classic sort of sports marketing firm.
Hmm.
We're no good at it. We could never figure out how to do it. And so our thesis has always been, if they find Strava and it's something that they're passionate about, then we're happy to talk and we'll figure out if there's a way in which we can do something even more creative. But the folks that you're finding on Strava, for the most part, they found it because they're having fun, because they're buddies. The amount of trash talking that happens on the pro tour, turns out after every the stage, it's fascinating. Like, there are internal competitions that are going on, not just for the stage victory, but who had the KOM on that climb, or
Yeah.
who pulled off something else.
Do you need a mammal, a pre-mammal Jewish guy as a sponsored podcaster, YouTuber, influencer for you guys? Because I could use one of the hats. I'm just putting it out there. We can
Oh
negotiate.
yeah, I knew I was going to get in trouble with this hat. So this thing is totally rogue, and you're going to laugh because I had to tell the guy. So we don't do gear ourselves. We're so bad at. We've never even managed to figure out how to do Strava swag. We have in the past, but we don't do it now. And this hat was created by a Strava member in Portland, Oregon, because he's so mad at me. It's like, I can't even buy a T-shirt from you guys. It's ridiculous. And so he's done this. He's like, I'm going to start doing these, and he sent it to me. So, in fairness to him, I actually texted him today and said, all right, tell me if you can get the guy to actually do a better Strava color orange, and I'll order up some of these hats. So Noah, first one will be headed your way.
All right. Well,
I'll find one for you.
I'll text you about that. One thing I admire about you, and I want to just give you, I don't know if you recognize it, is that you said no to making swag. You said no that you're not going to do some runners in the beginning. You said no that, hey, we're not good at this endorsement stuff. And I think as I'm getting older, I'm almost 40. I'm just so ready for this mammal life. And I'll tell you, 5 years ago, me and my buddy Anton, we always talked so much shit on these lycra. What's the spandex stuff? I was like,
Yeah.
oh, look at those people. Oh, you look silly. I wear it all the time. I love it. I love it. And
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason it's worn out there, but it does look really odd.
it's a little bit odd. But I mean, I commend you guys for saying no. And I think for me, as I've gotten older, I'm really trying to get better. Not at no, but yet, what am I yes to? What are my strengths? And I think you guys are you really guys are doing amazing at that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. If I had our VP of engineering on this call right now, he would say we are horrible at it. We continually sort of bite off more than we can chew. It's probably not no. It's more like not yet, not yet. That's a great idea, just not yet. And I'd say sometimes we're really good and sometimes not. But having that no list is as important as, are we really clear about the yes list? We are getting better about. We've got a board meeting coming up, and I know that part of that conversation will be, are we clear what we will not be doing, and making sure that even the board understands that.
So with Strava, I think one thing I started thinking about was the amount of insight you have into exercise and in healthy habits. Like, you guys literally have the world's repository of health. Like, maybe I'd say Fitbit and Apple have it on a different scale. So I guess one thing I was wondering from you is, like, what are some ways or habits for people to build better workouts? And I'm not an advanced cyclist. Like, I hit 80 miles a week as my target. So I guess I was curious, what have you observed for people to be able to do it or get started, especially with Strava and what you've seen?
One observation I've learned, both with age, but also watching on Strava. Early on in Strava, we realized we were creating a bit of a competitive atmosphere that was almost over the top. Like, people constantly going out to chase their PR or a segment KO or something like that.
You didn't track it didn't happen.
Yeah, that whole mentality, and to the point where we were accused of, a lot of people were actually intimidated and unwilling to join Strava because, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not an athlete. And there was a pivotal moment when we introduced photos to the activity process and your ability to upload a photo with your activity. That was a pivotal moment for us. And part of the internal discussion, this is full disclosure, part of the internal discussion was, we need to get people to slow down a little bit. Like, they need to go and enjoy the ride. They need to actually stop once in a while and capture that sunset or that sunrise or that mud that they just went through, because that's just as inspiring as somebody's performance. And so I think part of my piece of advice would be what I've learned over time, like recovery days, easy days, that's training. Like rest is part of training. I put just as much emphasis, anybody who goes and actually looks at the details of my activities on Strava says, I go slow a lot. Like my runs are often 9:30, 10-minute mile pace, but they're really important because by doing those days, they allow me those, couple days a week where maybe I am pushing for some reason because there's a specific thing that I'm pushing towards. So, one piece of advice that I have is don't worry about pace, speed, like what you look like on Strava. That's not what matters. It's recognizing that it all is part of training, and that rest and sleep, and things that you can't track on Strava, those are just as important as the things that you can. So that's one observation that I've seen both with my own sort of journey in athletics, as well as just the way in which I've watched people behave on Strava. The other one that I would say is the importance of setting goals. We have, and this isn't just a feature inside Strava, because frankly, this is an area we need to improve. You can set some basic goals in there, but even just more generally, what I can tell you, and we can actually, I should pull the data. I've got good data that I'm happy to share with you. I can send it offline, but like the statistics we've seen, what happens, when you set a goal versus when you don't on Strava is amazing. When you, it's like 80% greater likelihood you're going to accomplish it if you set it versus improvement that we see just naturally for somebody who's uploading daily. Another one, training with other individuals, whether you're training virtually, when you have more followers on Strava versus when you're independent on Strava, big difference in terms of just the quality and consistency of your training. You need those teammates, and it's really not about competing with them. It is the kudos. It's just the camaraderie. So we find that's been a really important part of Strava that we underestimated in the early days. So those would be three. Don't underestimate the rest. Set the goal, even if it's a simple one, and then find your team. Find that group that supports you.
Yeah, it's so spot on. And I think what you said as well, just get going, right? Just get it going and just take a first step. Even, I do think I was on Runkeeper years ago and my buddy's on Strava and I'm like, I'm not a cyclist and I'm not hardcore. And it was true. And it's interesting I love knowing the why that you guys added the photos. One thing that struck me though, Mark, you sound so passionate about it. You're obviously an athlete. You're an athlete first. Why did you step out for a while? Because that's something, I think about in my own company. Within Sumo Group, I took kind of 3 years off. I was like, I'm out. And I guess I'm curious your journey with that.
Yeah. So there's it's a fascinating journey that's had many chapters. So okay. I'll walk you through it real quick because it all sort of has a common thread. When we launched Strava, Michael was still on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast. I had run Kana before, and we knew we were building a software company. So we were in the Bay Area, and I ran it. And then my ex-wife, Lisa, is a very dear, close friend. We raised twin boys together. We've been divorced for like 15 years, but we're tight as thieves. And her health became an issue in 2009, 2010 timeframe. And so I stepped away. Michael stepped in and became CEO, and I served in a limited capacity. I served on the board, and I obviously was his confidant, but I was very focused on caring for our two boys. Late 2013, Michael's situation changes where his wife, Anna, is diagnosed with cancer for the third time. Yeah. And that's the bad news. The good news was my family situation was such that I had the capacity. So I stepped back in early 2014 and allowed Michael the freedom he needed to take care of Anna. But there was a caveat to that, which was I said to the board in 2014, look, while my situation is stable, it can change rapidly. And I am the primary parent, and these twins, Jake and Charlie, they're my life. And that's always going to be my priority. So let's be cognizant of that. And let's constantly be mindful that we're thinking through possible succession and so forth. And so I had a great time. I ran Strava from 14 through the middle of 16 for about 3.5 years. But we did do sorry, that's not right. 17. Yeah, it's 3.5. So 3.5, almost 4 years. And there was just a period where I ultimately said to the board and to the whole company, I was very transparent because we did a long search, but I I was stuck because the kind of way that I wanted to lead the organization, and at the same time the kind of parent, the kind of dad that I wanted to be to Jake and Charlie, they were at odds with each other. I live in a little town called Portola Valley, which is about
Love it.
45 minutes to an hour south of San Francisco, and our office is up in the city. And I I just couldn't figure out. I wasn't able to find that balance that I needed. Honestly, no. And so we did a lengthy search. We hired a great guy. We hired a guy named James Quarles out of Instagram to run the company, and I was able to take the step back that I needed to really focus in on Jake and Charlie and everything that was going on in their life. But I also took a pretty big step back because allowing James the space that he needed to run the company and to step in as a new CEO is never an easy task. And then if you fast forward, what happened late last year, November of 2019, was James stepped aside. Michael came back in. And with Michael's arrival back as CEO, I then, because I'm his partner and his confidant and so forth, I just stepped into an executive chair role, which just affords me the opportunity to be, sometimes I joke I'm the chief muckraker. I can get in and wreak a lot of havoc, but more importantly, just far more engaged than I could have been with James, just because of the relationship that Michael and I have and the things that he and I want to get done with the company. So sorry, that's a very long answer to your question, but
That's exactly what I wanted.
the thread is the kids. The thread is my boys, and the company knows that they come first.
I guess it's one thing that I've been conflicted about lately, which is just like head versus heart decisions, or like head versus gut. And it's not in retrospect, you're like, well, my kids were important. I chose it, and But at the time, you're also like, this is like my third child. It's not a real one, but it's a child of sorts, and that's a tough decision.
Oh, there's no question. Oh yeah, and I've often joked in both situations, Kana and Strava, there was a moment where I hired another CEO to come in and run it. And I often joke, it's a little bit like giving up your child for adoption. And then are you going to stay living in the house or not? Because if you're going to stay engaged, the first time around, I really didn't. Like I recognized this isn't going to be healthy. And so I stepped away and kind of went around its path and I moved on. In Strava, there was this balance point where you're right. And it was challenging. I think if you were to talk to James today, he's no longer here. He'd probably say that, yeah, he stayed living in the house and created too many problems. And, the founders were problematic and so forth. And, there might be an element of truth to that. I don't want to argue with him, but that third child is still there and we care deeply about it.
We have so our main company is AppSumo.com. It's the number one site online for software deals. Yeah. And we hired Eamon about 5 years ago, and he runs it, and he's phenomenal. The guy is amazing. And yeah, we struggle with exactly that. Like, and Chad is my partner, and it's like, are we involved too much? Do we involve too little? Eamon, how can we be supportive of you? Are we supporting you too much? And that's what, I'm curious to hear your source of the two things kind of around that. I was curious to hear more, what are the unique things that have helped keep you and Michael successful over such a long time period? Because Chad and I, honestly, we broke up. Like we broke up. We had a 2-year stint where I disagreed. We had a disagreement on vision. And I said, well, fuck you, and you take it and you go, good luck with it. And obviously that's not the best. That was my fault and not the best way of handling it. So yeah, I'm curious, two things with everyone always asks, but I feel like there's something unique with how you guys are partners. And I think another thing I'd like to know in that same question or same vein is how do you scale a company?
Let's tackle the first one because that one may be easier to answer, although it is unique. It's actually fun to talk to. I hadn't realized that you had the partner. I actually think that they're rare. I caution entrepreneurs that I talk to because they're, on the one hand, entrepreneurship can be really lonely. So the idea of finding co-founders and so forth, I think is so important. But then my next sentence is, by the way, just be prepared that most co-founding teams and then they said, but what about you and Michael? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty unique. So a couple of things come to mind that have worked for us. I'll bring up 3. One is, I think by definition, we complement each other well. And I always joke about our degrees, right? I have the degree in art history. Michael has the PhD in economics. There's left brain, right brain that's going on there. That's very real. He mentioned just the other day, his approach to problems is very analytical. He loves to dig in. He is the person that I can trust without question around our data. around our finances and so forth. He knows that my approach to problems is go look for the answer from somebody. There's an expert out there. Like, I don't need to be the expert. I need to use my network, and I need to go, like, we can find it. So that's one thing, is we just complement each other that way. Second thing I'll say is, we've learned over 20 plus years that I think we've always committed to the idea that the friendship will never die. Like, we know it's always there, but there are times when the business needs to be first over the friendship, and there's other times where the friendship needs to be first over the business. And we just need to be very transparent around where we think we are. And he and I have had similar hard situations, the way you described you had with Chad. There have been moments where we clearly were at odds. We've learned to try to keep that behind closed doors so that we're not out in the open with everybody else. And we find compromise. And then the third thing I'll bring up is, we have these funny tools, Noah, that we use today. We have things that help us get to, I don't even want to call it compromise, help us get to the right answer. And I'll give you one example. Michael and I bookend almost every problem that we come up against. And what I mean by that is, we'll take a challenge that the company's having, and we just, okay, what are the two bookends? What are the two extreme options here? I don't know. It could be something as simple as an executive hire. It's like, okay, what would the world look like if we just don't have that? We don't make that hire. Like, are there people internally that we can promote and so forth? Versus, great, we make it today, but we're clearly going to disrupt team chemistry, everything else. And then we know that the answer is probably somewhere in between, but by setting that framework, it just helps us bring sort of our two strengths to the table. So, and we've got a handful of just silly things like that. We have another one where we always approach problems with, okay, wait, there's a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term solution to this. Let's talk first about the long-term, because that's probably the easiest one, which usually is. Like, when you think long-term, it's like, even this COVID-19, right? Like, long-term, it's easy. Get the vaccine, right? It's like, we all know that the real solution here is we got to get the vaccine. And it's the short-term and a mid-term where it's like, oh, these are complicated. So we do that a lot. And by having those tools kind of in our arsenal, it's almost like we can operate shorthand.
That's really unique stuff. Any other tools or?
Well, even the way we communicate, I can't think of a day that goes by, maybe occasionally right now on the weekends, but we're religious about checking in every day. And I mean, again, we're remote today. I haven't seen him since early March, but we're religious about that consistency of connection. Sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation because there really isn't anything to do. But other times, actually, we'll get on the phone thinking that there wasn't anything to talk about, and it turned out an hour and a half later, we dived into something that was really important. So I would say that's probably the third one that, just off the top of my head, has been really valuable for us. And when a few days go by where we haven't, problems, like, things start to surface. Meaning, like, this stuff starts to get pent up. I didn't talk to him about that. And all of a sudden you have a backlog of information, things that you really wanted to ping the person about. And I think this is true not only for a business partner, but anybody on your team or anything like that. If you let it go too long, that's when the challenges come up.
Oh, that was awesome. And it was really great to hear your advice. I think for me, sometimes actually in our company, the worst is when I don't pay attention to you. And I know that's, I'm like, ooh, this person's not doing well because I'm not giving him any attention, and I don't want to. I love your communication thing with Chad. We stopped that. We used to do every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11. And then I would, message, hey, do we need to meet? No. Do we need to meet? No. And then then we would meet for like a week or two. And the trust, in all relationships, trust is important. Like, I've gone to Chad, he's one of my closest friends. And I went to him and I was like, hey, I don't feel like working. I'm going to go walk around India for a month. And my impression is, if you came to me and we were in a company together and you said, hey, I'm going to go walk around India for a month, I'm like, all right, fuck you. Like, get back to your desk and go work. I'm not going to stay here and work while you go, find yourself and, whatever, place in India. And Chad's first response was like, oh, great, man. I think that's what you need. I think you should go.
Yeah.
And it's still that
that's
today.
Where he knows friendship versus business. There is a way to dial those back and forth. And that's what Michael and I have. That's when you just sense, wait, he's clearly telling me something that's really important. And the idea is they're self-serving. If your personal and friendship needs are well served, the business is going to be healthy, and vice versa. So
yeah, the complementary skills too, because I'm more the louder, I would say. Like I'm on YouTube shirtless doing some stuff, and he's a programmer, and he has amazing opinions, but he won't tell you unless you ask, or if he has like an old fashioned in him, and then he'll tell you everything.
Yeah.
But it's definitely complimentary. Have you guys had any huge disagreements or vision disagreements where you're like, I really don't want to do Explore? Because even Explore, by the way, as a customer of yours, I was always like, why haven't they done this for years? I was wondering why you didn't do it. It seemed like the thing that we all needed the most. So I don't know, was there vision disagreements with that, or have you guys had any other ones?
We've definitely had disagreements. I think we've been aligned on vision, and we take a lot of comfort in the fact that we could show you a plan that dates all the way back to 2010, 2011, where we're largely on track in terms of vision. We just wish that we'd gotten there sooner. So to your point, like, I think we all know, like Explore, we wanted to get it out there, and it is amazing at times. Well, why does this take longer than it should? I know we've got restless investors as well. We have fantastic investors inside Strava, but even, I fully get it. It's like, come on, let's get this out the door. So there's probably where we've had disagreements. It might be personnel, it might be on execution, timing. But what's funny, and again, I think maybe this is the same thing you experience with Chad. It's like, if we just talk about it, sometimes we have to leave the conversation and come back. I have learned that, like in any relationship, there have been a few moments where it's like, hey, we are taking a timeout. Let's take a timeout here. We're clearly not getting to where we wanted. But I'm really fascinated by the fact that it's very rare that when we come back that we're still at odds. That a little bit of just reflection and then coming back to it, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's I don't want to call it a workaround. There's a solution. There's a solution that we're able to find. So, but yeah, it's usually kind of been around the tactical stuff.
What one thing I would like to just hear any insights on, because I think there's a lot of information on how do I get a business started, how do I get a few first customers, but there's really not a lot of material for someone like what you've done, which is like, hey, we got a company to 1,000 people. I think that's what you said, and then now Strava's at 180 people, and multi-million-dollar businesses like our company, and like yours is much bigger. And so I guess what I'm curious. What are some of the things that businesses need to implement? And obviously that's a very complex, people go to school for 2 years to find out, but maybe the first things that come to mind about, what has helped you guys scale to these larger sizes.
Well, it's funny to have you ask that, because so oftentimes I feel like we're the ones trying to learn how to do exactly what you're like. I don't look at myself when we scaled just Kana to, I think, at our peak, probably about 1,200 people or something in the heyday there, that first internet boom. That was unhealthy growth. That was, frankly, the acronym was GBF, get big fast. And just like we were trying to defend against some really big competitors, and we were making acquisitions and just doing things where we didn't scale in a way that was sustainable. So last thing I do is pull lessons from that, other than here's all the things not to do. I think with Strava, we're constantly looking at, if I'd say there's a change, the change is in really coaching both ourselves as leaders as well as the rest of the company, how to begin to let go of so many of the decisions and trust others in the organization, that if they understand what the goal is and what the general plan is, in order to effectively scale. There's all kinds of tactical things we can get to, but just philosophically, the big thing I think that's been helpful is when we've learned how to entrust in others, empower those folks, and you have to be comfortable then to let the decisions get made. And that's, for an entrepreneur, it's a really hard thing to do, because so much of your early life was you had to make every decision. In fact, you had to be the person who executed every single thing. But the change is to really recognize that you can't do that anymore. And if you don't, you won't get the best people working for you if you don't allow them that freedom. And so I think that one, combined with a really silly one, which is, I am not good when I don't know everybody by face and name. And I have tremendous respect for the founders who grow companies of, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people, because for me, I have so much affinity and so much appreciation for being in that small room and hanging out with the 10 folks around the table and kind of knowing everybody's significant others and kind of their personal lives. And the other philosophical thing I'd say about scale is that you have to look for that connection in other ways. Even the 180 people today, I laugh sometimes. We use Slack and so forth, and I have to hop into Slack and check the directory and look. It's like, oh, they're on that team. Oh yeah, I got to connect with that person. I haven't been able to do it in a while. And those sound silly, but trying to figure out how to keep those connections as the company grows. There's a real art to doing that, and I think it's important. But you have to realize you have to do it in different ways than you did when it was just 20 people hanging out in a single room.
Yeah, that's interesting. How much is the productivity or structure or operations change with coronavirus?
We're one of the fortunate companies that maybe you guys have experienced something similar. I
We've
mean,
gone up.
yeah, I mean, exactly. First thing is from a business perspective, we're grateful to just be in a place where we are supporting people who are active and people are being smart. They're getting out there and they're
How much
clearing
is
their
it
head.
up? Not revenue, but usage or whatever numbers you're comfortable sharing. Like how much has it increased during this?
Yeah, we're so careful we
Yeah.
share so little, but what I can say is it's significant. Like what we're seeing, what's really fascinating. It's like you said earlier, Strava has this unique view into what's happening in the world at any moment in time when it comes to athletic activity. So we cannot necessarily predict behavior, but we can tell you in any given moment. So for instance, we can look in certain parts of Europe right now where, like in the UK, it's just incredible. Like it's just incredible with shelter in place, but very clear guidance from the government, sort of what activity should look like, off the charts. And like I mentioned to you, the way in which they're doing it for charitable acts, the way in which they're doing it with families, the way in which they're connecting with people. But then you go look at Spain and Italy, gone. Like it's very clear that those countries took their government guidance seriously. They stopped working out. And we can see that. We can see when a polar vortex rolls through the northern part of the United States, because all of a sudden, all those
cool.
cyclists who thought they were strong, they disappear. Right. So I think that that's, our insight into that piece of it. To your question, in terms of how has it changed for us at Strava, we're very much trying to keep up with what's happening with the business. We were fortunate in that we can largely go to work from home and not see it affects us, but we're able to do our business. We're able to continue to do releases. We're able to continue to operate and service. So we're grateful for that. And I think the challenges that just come recognizing the personal dynamics that happen here. I mean, half of our company are young parents with little kids at home, and these poor folks are trying to figure out how to be parents, teachers, coworkers, all things simultaneously. The other half of our team are single, and frankly, they're in an apartment maybe by themselves. And if they're not connecting with their coworkers during the day, it can get really lonely. And so I think that for us is kind of the more interesting side to this whole thing, is just the how as a company can we show up, not just for our community, but for our team, for our employees. And it's really hard right now. I think we look forward to the day when at least the office is open. We won't expect everybody to be back there, but we'd like to know we have the option.
Yeah, I love that phrase. It's a phrase my friend Max says, and he always says, like, you can't call it in.
No.
You got to show up. And I think that's something that's obvious with how you talk about your people and you behave in the company. This is a quick one, and I don't want to know any of your numbers. I don't care. But you guys seem actually more exclusively or secretive about it than I would expect. And I guess I was just a little curious about that, because you seem like a very open person too. And I don't need to know anything. I'm just curious, the thought process there.
Well, what we've decided, we decided there's a set of numbers that we think are of value, and we can walk it through. I mean, I can bore you with the number of like, here's a great one. Took us 8 years to see our first billion activities. Took us 18 months to see our second billion. Took us less than a year to see our third billion activity. Like, we can show momentum. We love, here's a stat we love. One of the ones we track really closely inside Strava is it's the ratio of being active to being in app. So for every minute that our athletes are in the app, eyeballs in the app, they spend an average of 50 minutes working out, 50. And we're watching that actually increase. So
that's cool.
That when we say we're not interested in numbers, we're, like you said earlier, we're purpose driven. And so, yeah, we could sit back and disclose sort of financials and so forth, but people are going to, they're going to do with it what they want there. And that's not what's really important. So what we try to describe to people is, uh, here's what's going on, good, bad, and
I
otherwise. Like,
love that.
people love about the 50 million athletes, but we're always quick to point out, it's like, we're nowhere close to our, like, it's exciting to see us athletes a month, but has anybody looked at what the growth rates are of an Instagram or a LinkedIn? It's like, look, we're small potatoes. And we know that. The thing that we really enjoy is if we can't build a great business with 50 million athletes that are part of our community, we're kind of idiots, right? That's our,
Yes.
no, if we don't add another member to our community, I'd like to think we could still build a great business for those who have found us. And so
That's interesting.
hopefully that makes sense. It's
It
not
does.
so much that we're trying to hide the numbers. It's just like,
Yeah.
we want to make sure people understand what's relevant for us.
Actually, it's definitely making me reflect on what KPIs we look at internally, but also, what we want to share externally. I think one thing that I've been working on with our company is like, how do we have numbers that our customers have success? We call them sumo-lings. Their success as well as our success is all aligned.
Yes.
And I like that. That's really interesting. The minutes in the app to the minutes of being active. I'm going to think about that. I don't even know what the question is. I just wrote the word Zwift down. So I got a trainer just to use Zwift, and it's amazing. It's really enhanced my training. It's enhanced convenience. It's a weird ass place. It's like this virtual world from 1995 that I don't know. I just put the word Zwift. So let me just put the word out there, Zwift, and what does that mean to you, and what's your take on that?
Yeah. No, so first phrase, love it. I'm a Zwift fan. I got my trainer set up in my garage. People who know me know I very rarely get out on a road bike these days. Unfortunately, I have a rather sketchy history on the road bike. I've been put in the hospital twice by cars and once by myself. It cost me 11 surgeries just to get out of that one accident alone. So for whatever reason, the road has just not been good karma. So Zwift was like a great alternative. I can stay in the safety of the garage, and unless I fall off my trainer, which is possible, I think I'll avoid the hospital. Great partner to Strava. Really fun to sort of. We just announced some stuff. We tried to clean up segments inside Zwift just to make that a little more fun for folks. My cautionary tale: I haven't figured out how to get onto Zwift and just take it easy. I get every time I get onto Zwift, and if I'm just gonna go ride for 45 minutes an hour,
to them.
there's always somebody who goes by and it's like, oh, I can just keep up. So I'm still looking for the way in which I can enjoy Zwift but not feel like it's my hard workout of the week.
Yeah.
No, it's a little bit of Strava meets World of Warcraft or something. It's such a fascinating sort of experience to kind of dive in and. Big fans.
Who do you love following on Strava? So I'm Noah Kagan on Strava. Obviously, we're gonna follow each other forever now.
Yeah.
That's a kind of interesting thing about what people want to share publicly and privately, and who we end up following. Because like I'll follow a few celebs, like the guy I think who won Tour that's in Colombia, but some of the people I want to find out new routes, and then some people I'm like, I just don't want to see your stuff anymore. So I guess who do you enjoy following?
Yeah. So good news on this front is that this is a perfect example of dialing up features so that you can manage your feed far more effectively, because and again, you can appreciate from the Facebook days and everything else, what an art it is to try to figure out sort of what that follow group looks like. And when I talked about sort of your tribe, there's these concentric circles, right? There's at the heart and soul, I know that my favorites today, that's the feature that we added just a few weeks ago where, yeah,
it was
going to be.
It was a little confusing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I did mean to cut you off, but I just want to share. It's confusing to use.
I know.
And then I had to go in and like figure out. I'm like, are you my favorite? Are you not my favorite? And it was like, okay, I have a few other things I wanted to do today besides that.
Yeah, it's, and I think it actually is for a subset of our audience. And I fall into this trap where I have plenty of followers, but I have hundreds of people that I'm also following just with 11 years of history on Strava. And what was actually frustrating to me was just, I would miss people's activities that I really wanted to see. And so at least by taking the time to pick those few people, the reason they're favorites isn't because they're doing something. It's just that those are the people where if I've missed something, I'm almost going to be in the penalty box. Like if I miss an upload from my two boys, from Jake or Charlie, or, from my, whoever it might be, there's a local element to how I think about who I follow.
Mm.
Just based on where I am here in Portola Valley, there's a group of folks I've never run or ridden with directly, but they are my tribe on these trails. They are the ones who probably today own the KOMs and the CRs and all the records. And I can only wish I could chase them down, but they've kind of become the local legends around here. And so I follow that. I have a local connection to them because we're on the same terrain. And so I find that really valuable. And then there's that third category. There's just there's a really eclectic group of people that are worth following on Strava that, that it might be someone like yourself. It might be, I love following Lance on. I find Lance. It fascinating. Yeah, to see what he's doing, and other guys in the pro tour, or there's some ultra running community. It's just a fascinating group on Strava. Oh my goodness, they just talk about the things that they'll just go do for a Saturday afternoon. But almost more than that, just again, the photos, for me, it's all about the photos and the titles. And if you're creative there, then that's the kind of thing that I love to follow. So that's kind of my third.
Yeah. Group. Any in that third category you can call out? I'm looking on your list to see if anyone I recognize or I can try following.
There's some well-known names within the ultra community, folks like Jim Walmsley, or actually, I just saw today. It was really neat because she tweeted it out as well. There's the woman who ran the Boston Marathon, who won the Boston Marathon last year in that horrific rainstorm, first American, and I forget how many decades, Des Linden. There's just examples of that where these, might be an elite athlete, but somewhat obscure. You wouldn't otherwise know about them unless you're following the sport. And they're just always doing, like, the reason Des popped up today was that she just went and tried to challenge this person for a 5K loop, and you actually go look at the performance. It's just awe-inspiring, and she didn't quite get it, and she was kind of laughing about it. And it's that kind of thing where it's fun to see the human side of these folks and what they're kind of doing every day. I think that's probably why I enjoy Lance. It's just, you see, he's like the rest of us. He struggles with his own sort of performance and time, and it's kind of fun.
I think as a non-professional athlete, it's interesting to see the training that they go through. Like I saw the guy, I don't know what his name is in Colombia, but I follow, and like I'll do a 30-mile ride. I'm like, look at you, I'm proud of you, Noah. He's like, his morning breakfast is 100.
Yeah.
And I think we've never been able to see that before. That's never been public. I kind of was curious, about public versus private, but you called it out earlier really, really well, that Facebook kind of made it okay. They kind of said, hey, everyone, it's okay to kind of share some of this stuff.
Yeah. And I think that it's all about, is there value in the sharing? The pro cyclists were the perfect example. It took a long time. They were the one thing that we did for them that was unique was we allowed them to hide their power. It was not something that we gave to the everyday athlete, but we set it up where if you were a professional cyclist, you could confirm that on Strava. We had a setting that allowed them to hide their power because they were so nervous about sharing their training techniques and their volume and their efforts that they didn't want their competitors to see it. And then there was this sea change. I think what they started to realize was the risk of doing that was outweighed by just kind of being out in the open and sharing their training. And when you start to think about their business, which is developing sponsorship dollars and developing sort of a marketing presence, Strava helps serve that purpose. It took them a while.
That's so interesting. Final 3 questions. Number 1, you just keep saying great stuff. I can't wait to re-listen to this. Like I want it to end, but not end. And then I want to listen to it a bunch of times, and I'm so excited to share it. And a lot of wisdom. You have so many great phrases, GBF or success is results minus expectations. What the final thing was, you guys called Strava and tracking bicycling specifically 10 years ago, 11 years ago. What are you seeing in terms of the future of athletic training? What are you kind of expecting and upcoming in the next 10 years?
I go 10 years out. One of the things that I get excited about, and here's where the company's going to kill me, but I'm fascinated to continue to watch the evolution of how we can participate in even broader range of sports. Like I get fascinated about what's happening at the team level. We've never really been able to, what is it to visualize what happens on a soccer field or on a basketball court or on a, in a football field and so forth. So for me personally, at a personal level, not only Strava, I get really excited about the way in which we can capture what's happening there, but then integrate it where you're now seeing sort of the athlete to athlete. So I just geek out on this idea. And we're starting to see elements of that where they're literally using everything from camera work to the wearables, I think getting more and more integrated into the clothing and so forth, more seamless. So I think that's a fun one to watch because I just think it's a space. And candidly, if you even think about like with COVID-19 and what's going to happen to professional sports and the challenge 100,000 people into a stadium, like even just recreating what that experience is going to look like, I think there's opportunity there. So that's just a fun space that we don't spend a lot of time inside Strava today thinking about. But if you give me 10 years, it's why I'm excited for Strava because we want to play in the middle of whatever sport is going to being visualized digitally.
What are some of the books in your background? Everyone always likes reading books. I thought I saw some books. So I was curious if any books have come to mind or the ones that are on your shelf.
Yeah, I got strange ones back there. I've got
Stranger the better.
Krakauer's. I got Krakauer's into thin air sitting behind me. I've got I've got some really old school stuff there. There's one by Michael Porter, competitive analysis by Michael Porter. I think from a business perspective, I go old school. There's two that I actually have had out even in the last 6 months, and they're both by Collins. There's original Built to Last, and then there's Good to Great. That to me, they're just timeless. I still love bringing those out. Just a really both an analytical look at prior companies that really helps me sort of understand sort of putting theory to practice. So yeah, those are two. I'm reading one right now. Actually, a good friend of mine just launched, so I'll do a plug for her. It's called The Forever Transaction by a woman named Robbie Kelman Baxter. I've known her for years. She was a classmate of mine, but she's really become one of the country's leading experts in subscriptions and sort of membership economies. And she's got these two books out. There's one called The Membership Economy, but she just did Forever Transaction. It's really good. Just started reading it a couple of days ago. So those would be the business ones.
Yeah, or I'm super into fiction. Sometimes I just hear another business book. I'm like, all right, yeah, you did this thing. I don't care. And
you'll laugh. I talked about this earlier today. I went old school again, even on the fiction side. I brought one out that I hadn't read for years, but it's probably my all-time favorite, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, and that is like one of my favorite movies all time.
Oh, it's just the best. It is such a good. It's just, I call it the 3 R's. Redemption, resilience, and revenge. It's just I just love it. So yeah, I've probably read it now 3 or 4 times throughout my life, but it's just as good. It's like watching Star Wars again or something like that. I mean, I could just keep reading it. So
is the book better?
That's the one I had.
Is the book better than the movie? Because the
book is really good.
All right, I'll put it on the list.
Just because it's the classic situation where you just can't get all the detail and all the stuff in that Dumas does in the book.
Oh, okay. I can't wait for that. Two ideas, suggestions for you. Have you read The Secret Race?
No. Secret Race.
All right, I'll send it to you. It's my treat. No. I'll follow up with you after this, and I'm going to send you 2 books. That one, and I'm reading this book now on audiobook. So The Secret Race, we'll just say, it's Lance Armstrong's teammates book. And it is...
Oh, is that right?
It is... This is years ago. It's probably from 5 to 8 years ago. Unreal.
Is that
Unreal.
Right?
It's one of my favorite books in the past. It's probably my favorite book in the past 2 years. The other book I'm listening on audiobook is called 1 Second After.
Oh, no, another one.
I'll send you. It'll be my treat. But 1 Second After is basically America gets attacked with a EMP, so all of our electronics go out. It's an electromagnetic pulse, and it's kind of like this thing that's happened with Corona. Like electricity's out, so the cars are out, and then the food. There's a run on the food, and what other things kind of happen. And so I'm only halfway through, but I'm really loving that.
Okay.
But I'll make sure I get you those 2 books, and I'm gonna. It's funny. I made a video this morning. It's called like Why I Hate All People on YouTube Talking About Business. And it's because the real ones are the ones not making videos. They're actually working. And the second, and then I was, there's all these billionaires who I admire that you don't know who their names are. But I think the other component of that is, what are some of these things that are classical? Like, which books are classics that should still be read or should still be listened to, versus trying to look at some new kid who, put up a new title. I don't know where okay, look, this is one of these questions. I don't know where it comes from, but I just knew I had to ask you. And this is where we'll end with. What does it mean to live a great life to you?
What does it mean to live a great life? The first thing that pops to my mind, and you're gonna laugh, is like, what is a great life is when I don't have to set an alarm clock. When I get to wake up at whatever time my body says it's time to wake up, that is a great life. And thankfully, as I've gotten older, I seem to find myself in a pretty good place that way. I think so. That's and I'm actually not being cynical or facetious. Like that is, I'll keep it simple there. And then the other is, I guess I'd use the phrase quality over quantity. And what I mean by that is, whether it's, I don't have this huge long list of friends, but man, the ones that I do, they got my back and I got theirs. I've just got the twin boys, but I can tell you they're, 19 years old, and they've gone from these two things that I just want to make sure could eat and drink to now they're two of my best friends, and I'm so excited to see what they're going to do in the next chapter of their life. And so that quality, always focusing on the quality over the quantity. How much? Like, it's not about how much money. It's not about how many cards. It's not about how many hours. It's not about how many miles, but go out and enjoy the quality of whatever it is that I'm doing. And the friends that I have, that's a good life right there.
That's it. Mark Gainey, Strava, you're the man.
Oh, man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Noah. This is fun. This is fun.
I
look forward to following you on Strava.